Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Conversations Over Coffee with me, Rabbi Steve Warnick. Today, I am delighted to welcome Jakir Manela to the conversation. I look forward to talking to him about peoplehood and planethood, the intersection between Jewish people and Jewish tradition and climate and our planet and environmental education, concern, and advocacy. But before we get to that, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and betzedeck.tv. If you like today's conversation, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share with your friends. Comments are always appreciated and help us get the conversation to more people. If you have any questions for our guest or for me, please be sure to put them in the Facebook or YouTube chat, and we'll do our best to bring them into the show. And with that out of the way, let's begin with a short video about the new Hazon and Pearlstone that are coming together, and then we'll jump right into our conversation.
The last few years have been really hard. We've been disconnected from each other. We've been attached to our screens. We haven't had that kind of authentic connection that community provides.
Our mission at Hazon and Pearlstone is to lead a transformative movement, deeply weaving sustainability into the fabric of Jewish life. And we do that through three core pillars of activity. First, through immersive retreats and immersive transformative experiences. Second, through Jaffe programs, Jewish outdoor food, farming, and environmental education. And third, through climate and sustainability action.
In so many texts and in so much.
Okay, I guess we're back. Allow me to introduce Jakir Manela, who is the CEO of Hazon and Pearlstone. He was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area, graduated from the University of Wisconsin 2004. That means he's a badger, though I'm a gopher, so Midwest is all those, rodent kind of animals. He went to work at Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center as a Teva Jewish outdoor environmental educator, then moved back to the Chesapeake region in order to establish North America's first Jewish community farm, Kayam Farm at Pearlstone, 2006. Jakir was promoted to become Pearlstone's executive director in 2012, and now he is the chief executive officer, rather, of both Hazon and Pearlstone as they continue their merger together. Join me in welcoming Jakir Manela to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's great to be here with you.
It's nice to see you, Jakir. I got to start with the first thing. It's like, if you were to ask a Jewish mother, what does she want her son to be when he grows up? A farmer is not going to be the answer, or at least in most cases, it's not going to be the answer. Tell us about what motivated you to start a farm. What did you learn from that experience, and how has that experience really prepared you for the job that you have today?
Thank you, Reb Steve. Again, it's great to be with you. Really honored by the invitation and excited to talk with you today. I think there's a whole generation of people, really multiple generations, that have grown to access our hearts and our souls and our sense of spirituality, certainly our connection to Jewish holidays and the calendar and all the wisdom in our tradition by understanding how rooted that is in natural cycles, in food, in agriculture. And in a real sense, tikkun olam is this, unfortunately, become this sort of like trite, superficial phrase that's like thrown around in parlance in secular culture, which in maybe some ways is good, but a real sense that a Jewish sensibility and a Jewish life is one of commitment to building a better society, a more just and sustainable future for our world. And if we're not doing that, are we really in alignment with our teachings and our traditions? And I think that there are a lot of parents out there that have a sense of that, right? That we hope that our kids find their own way, find their own path, that it means something to them, this culture, this tradition, this heritage, that they make it their own, and that they show up as good people and help to build a better society. And certainly if we're reading the news, we see how much climate in particular and environmental and social crises of all kinds are just more and more inevitable and at an emergency level. So I think I can affirm for you that when I first told my folks that I was going to be moving to Baltimore to start a Jewish farm, they said, Can you say that again? What? But it's been a long journey, been here now almost 16 years. And the work we do building community and making our culture and our values relevant for the next generation and building a brighter future is something that my parents, my grandparents, my children, I hope someday my grandchildren can be proud of. I can tell we have our annual meeting here on the land on the farm tomorrow evening, and my folks are coming and they're very proud to be part of it. And I think that's true for all the young adults, young people who are finding their voice, right, in this movement. And to see that, again, I think that's all we can hope for, is that our young people find our voice and are able to find their own sort of anchor and orientation to Jewish tradition and then step into that, in an empowered way.
So one of the things that I think about when I think about these topics is up until the Industrial Revolution, human beings lived lives that were much more connected to the land and to the seasons and to the environment. And one doesn't have to go far within our Jewish tradition to find those connections. I mean, as you said, so much of Judaism centers around food. What you can eat, when you can eat it, when you can't eat, for how long you can't eat, when do you break the fast, with whom are you breaking the fast, and around the agricultural cycles. And in some ways, the Industrial Revolution disrupted that, and we need to reclaim that language, that connection. Tell us a little bit about the way in which Hazon and Pearlstone view that reclamation happening and why it's so important.
Thank you for that framing, Steve. I think it's really deep and both critique or just observation of where we are as a society. And to be clear, I think neither you nor I are saying, hey, everybody, let's stop using electricity. Let's go back to, horse-drawn carriages and right.
You don't want to be Karaites.
Right. But I think, and at the same time, we can absolutely trace the trends that have now brought us to a global climate emergency to the beginning of real intensive fossil fuel combustion during the Industrial Revolution, and a whole series of revolutionary societal changes that, in many cases enabled new opportunities and in some cases, longer lifespans, and also were the seeds of great challenges for our culture and our society. When we think about our work at Hazon and Pearlstone, we look out and we see, crises and challenges on the global scale, on the communal scale, on a personal scale. Personally, we know that there's such a challenge, particularly in the Jewish community and in all faith communities, right? For our faiths, our cultures, our communities to speak to and continue engaging, particularly younger generations, but people of all generations, right? As the largest denomination is now the nuns, people with no affiliation. And so but that doesn't mean there's not a sense of religiosity. There's not a yearning for meaning out there in the world. So there's a real sense of where are we as individuals looking for meaning, and where are the institutions and Jewish institutions speaking to that need, and where are we not? And then communally, we see, the work of Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, the challenge of isolation, certainly related to the Industrial Revolution and post-World War II sort of suburbanization and how that enabled some great opportunities, but also disconnected us from each other in so many ways, and disconnected ourselves from the natural world, the resources that enable our lives to be what they are, and a real sense of missing, what deep community really means. That there was more of a sense of, pre-Industrial Revolution, and still is in many places around the world. How do we rediscover and lift that up and make that the priority that it is? And on a global scale, we see a global series of global ecological crises, with climate change certainly at the top of the list, but biodiversity, extinction of species, overfishing, right? Natural spaces. There's a way in which those three levels of that ladder of sort of challenge and crises all sort of reinforce each other, right? And how when you look at the lack of community or the ecological crisis, it can almost sort of exacerbate, right, our personal sense of helplessness and anxiety. And climate anxiety and grief is a real thing. So what we do in our work is really step into this moment with not denying that any of that's happening, but with a sense of love, with a sense of community. We connect people to the earth and to each other, right? Put your hands in the ground and learn how to grow a vegetable. Harvest the you pick strawberries and say that bracha and embrace that moment of gratitude. Come together to celebrate a holiday on the land, watch the sunset, see the stars come out, experience our calendar and our traditions of tzedakah, which were born on the farm, right? These traditions of justice started with all of us putting aside parts of our harvest for those in need. And then from that place, from a place of love, from a place of connection, build a brighter future. And I think our work, as the video mentioned, in immersive retreats and Jewish environmental education and climate action is really reflecting a deep commitment to culture change that leads to systemic change. You know, there's a great quote, a guy named Gus Speth, who founded the World Resources Institute, was one of the leaders of the World Wildlife Fund, some of the largest secular environmental advocacy organizations in the world. And he says, I used to think the biggest environmental problems were loss of biodiversity, pollution, and climate change. I was wrong. The biggest challenges we have are greed, apathy, and selfishness. And for that, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. So we're trying to speak to people's hearts and minds and build a new sense of Jewish community and human community to build that brighter future.
What's your theory of change?
So we think about that culture change and immersive culture change leading to systemic change, such that you give people a taste of what it's like to live in sustainable, spiritually vibrant communities. And then how does that enact and lead to the change that we want to see in the world? So we impacted over 50,000 people a year pre-COVID, and that's poised to grow exponentially in the years ahead. And we want to see that flourishing sense of Jewish community and Jewish inspiration through immersive retreats and Jewish environmental education programs, summer camps and holiday celebrations and after-school programs, adult workshops, teen youth groups, all kinds of programs. And then take the next step by saying, great, we've had this amazing, inspiring experience. Now how do we live out these values? And one of the big initiatives that we're rolling out in the next couple of months is in the climate action realm. It's called the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. And this engages some of the largest Jewish organizations in the country and in the world, the umbrella entities, right? The umbrella for all the Jewish federations, for the JCCs, for the denominations, for summer camps, for day schools, and all of these institutions that are not primarily oriented around climate and sustainability, but are oriented around vibrant Jewish life. These are the leaders and institutions that are committing to say, we all need to do something about climate. And we're facilitating a process where each of those umbrella entities are creating their own climate action plans. And when we announce the coalition in September before Rosh Hashanah, we'll announce it and we'll release the climate action plans of these national umbrella entities. Now, it's not public yet, but Steve, this is for you and me and everybody watching, a sneak preview.
Not public.
Right. And when we launch that, we'll really invite and call upon Jewish leaders and institutions everywhere to join the coalition, to designate a liaison that can join a community of practice where we can learn from each other about solar farms, about green loan funds, about food waste, about all the ways that we can make a difference, and really go on a journey together to mobilize the Jewish world at pace and at scale to take climate action. And that comes from a deep place of culture change through the retreats, through the education that then leads to that climate action.
Yeah, but the retreats are usually a one-off. So I'm interested in terms of where's the frequency of contact and the repetition that's necessary to bring about that kind of culture change. And I'll give you a specific example. So I'm here now in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to try to bring a group of people to Pearlstone, that's a big commitment.
Right.
It's a big commitment of time because you need at least one travel day each way to get there.
Yeah.
A big commitment of dollars, because as Canadians, the American dollar value means that it's 25% more,
right?
And that makes it hard in order to go there. And so I'm just wondering aloud with you, like, what would be the ways that my community, which has distance and a border, to cross might be able to engage in this in a meaningful way that goes beyond a retreat?
It's a great question, and an important challenge. So first, I would say it's still over the border, but Isabella Freedman Jewish Retreat Center, which is part of the Hazon-Pearlstone network, is a little bit closer, 6 hours.
A little bit closer, right? We could probably do that in a bus ride in a day.
Yeah, but still, granted, I understand what you're saying, that it's a lot. And we engage tens of thousands of people all around the country and actually all around the world who are not able to, be in close proximity to our two major retreat centers. There are a lot of other great Jewish retreat centers out there, and immersive experiences we really believe in. And this is not just Hazon and Pearlstone, but throughout the Jewish world, right? If we think about what are understood to be the most impactful Jewish experiences, Israel trips, day school, and summer camp, all really immersive experiences, right? So the retreat, as you're pointing out, may not be every weekend a retreat, but it still has that power to ignite something. And so we encourage folks to think about where and how immersive experiences could play into your community's journey on these issues. And in general, in terms of vibrant Jewish life, immersive experiences are really important. And Jewish environmental education does not require an immersive experience. It can be the most powerful when there's an immersive element to it. But we have amazing partners up there in Toronto with Shoresh Jewish Environmental Programs. And the founding executive director there, Risa Allison Cooper, is now our Hazon's chief climate officer, helping to really drive forward and lead the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition. So Toronto specifically is really a great center for this work. And you can have programs on Bela Farm with Shoresh connected to forest, to farm, to food without going to a retreat. We do believe that the immersive experience will take that depth of impact even greater. And wherever we are on that spectrum of education, we believe it's now really clear to all of us who are reading the news and paying attention that we all need to start on the path of action or continue on the path of action and do as much as we can. So it's all about finding the partners, finding the spaces, and finding the ways that we can get into this work through immersive retreats, Jewish environmental education, and climate action from whatever entry point we can find. And our role at Hazon is to really help organizations and leaders all across the Jewish world find those entry points and find that meaningful pathway.
I just want to remind people that if they have questions for Jakir to put them in the Facebook or YouTube chat. We're happy to bring them into the show. Jakir, how do you measure success?
Great question. We have a whole series of evaluation systems for our retreat guests, our program participants, surveys that go out that rank, ask folks to rank everything from the quality of the rooms, the food, the service, the customer service that we provide, and obviously programmatically, there's a different sense of evaluation around, what are the attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors that change as a result of our programs. And then in terms of climate action, we're just getting ready to launch the coalition, but we're actually hoping to see concrete reductions in greenhouse gas emissions as a result of this work. So we really aim for that concrete evaluation strategy and structure. The simplest is just to ask the net promoter score question, right? Would you recommend this retreat experience or this program to your friends, to your family, to your network? But we've gone much farther than that, particularly on the education side. Years ago, there was a report on this field, which the video mentioned, Jewish Outdoor Food Farming Environmental Education. The acronym is JAFE. And a third-party research firm funded by national foundations came in and did an evaluation on not all, but many of the immersive JAFE organizations and programs. And a few stats I would lift up from that. First, that we found that the vast majority, over 75%, particularly of young adults who come to our programs, are feeling disconnected and alienated from Jewish life. That's the starting point we see with a lot of young adults. And then coming out of the program, because of their experience at Pearlstone, at Isabella Freedman, through Hazon, they feel, it's over 90% now feel, I consider myself a leader in my Jewish community. Again, empowered, right? How do I think about my Jewish community? Over 90% say, I'm motivated to make the world a better place by Jewish values. I'm motivated by Jewish values. Over 90% feel a connection to Jewish traditions and customs, and that those things add meaning to their life. So those are just some of the survey results from third-party research over the years. And that's why Hazon and Pearlstone have grown so dramatically, because there's really clear data that show how deep the impact is from this work.
Do you have people on your staff that are expert Jewish educators, rabbis, people that have all that Jewish chomer that you then can translate into those experiences?
Definitely, it wouldn't work otherwise. Our new chief program officer at Hazon is an amazing guy named Yoni Stadlin, who's the founding director of Eden Village Camp, really the premier Jaffe Jewish environmental farm-to-table summer camp in North America. There's now an Eden Village Camp, not too far from you. I
grew up at my shul, my former shul, Added this from Marion. I know his father very well.
Yeah, by Dov Peretz Elkins, and we all owe you a great debt of gratitude for having that impact on Yoni. He's an incredible Jewish educator and leader. We also have a wonderful camp director here at Pearlstone, Mira Menyak, who is one of the earliest staff members at Bamidbar, which is the Jewish wilderness therapy program out in Colorado. She's now running our summer camp program. Shamu Sadeh, who's the founder and director of Adama up at Isabella Freedman, has a PhD in environmental education and comes from a long line, over 7 generations of Jewish Hungarian farmers on the land. And our rabbi on staff is Rabbi Petachia Lichtenstein, who comes from deep Torah, including Hasidic Torah, modern Orthodox, and really open to all denominations and teachings. He himself is a farmer as well. And so there's just a beautiful array of educators and teammates that bring this Torah to life, and it's really a pleasure to learn from all of them.
Great. We have a question, and that is, do you believe there's an incoming conflict between farm use for food and farm use for fuel?
Great question. Yes. And I don't know if it's incoming or already present in some ways. When we think about how land is used, and we look at hunger and poverty issues, when we think about how food is grown, obviously there are organic foods and regenerative agriculture methods out there, but a whole lot of food out there is still grown in conventional ways, and that's understandable. We're not here to judge. We're here to build a big tent and help people move forward from wherever they're at. And we try to practice regenerative and sustainable agriculture at Pearlstone, at Isabella Freedman. Hazon Detroit has partners with sustainable farms as well. And there is a sense that, trying to grow crops that are better than fossil fuels for fuel is still better than burning coal and gas. So there's a permaculture principle. Permaculture is the system of integrated ecological design, thinking about food and waste and shelter, everything through a sort of integrated ecological lens. And the permaculture principle is sometimes we have to use some transition technologies, and we can use it for a decade or 2 decades while we build a different paradigm moving forward. I would think about this farm fuel use, not necessarily, it may be a long-term thing, but it may also just be a transitional technology or method that we use while we're trying to really scale renewable energy, energy efficiency, electrify everything, right? There's a whole infrastructural revolution that we're going to see in the next few decades, which is a great book about this if you haven't read it. The Ministry for the Future. Really highly recommend this, by Kim Stanley Robinson. It sort of thinks about the next few decades and all the deep paradigm shifts that are about to come our way, including food, including farm, including energy.
The Ministry for the Future?
Yeah.
Sounds like a high holiday sermon.
Check it out. Highly recommend it.
I'm going to have to get that. That's interesting that you asked that question. Some of my colleagues and I are sharing with each other what our summer reading lists are. What's on your summer reading list?
I'm reading Rumi right now, and the Sufi kind of wisdom of deep mystic attachment or non-attachment to the natural world and to things as they are. Just finishing up now this amazing book called We Are the Weather. I don't know if you know this one by Jonathan Safran Foer, author of Everything is Illuminated. this is also a really, really powerful book about climate, and through the perspective of a North American Jew who's, has young kids and is a descendant of Holocaust survivors, and thinking about the fear and the anxiety and what we can all do about it. So would definitely recommend We Are the Weather. And there's also a book I just got called Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. This was written a few years ago, where there was really a sense of panic and hopelessness, particularly in the States, and seeing all the different challenges, including climate and others. And how do we think about those moments and where we are, in particular facing climate, but facing a lot of challenges, and not just give into that, but understand that dark is not just scary, it's also uncertainty. And there's actually a certain openness to what could happen next. Actually led for Shavuot, a night hike called Hope in the Dark. And it was right at the beginning of the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and it was trying to an exercise in, let's be in the dark, no flashlights. Let's feel what that feels like and come into the Torah, the receiving of the Torah, from a sense of that openness. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel uncertain, and try to receive from a place of, we don't know what's going to happen, right? And from that place of humility and hope, to step into it in that way.
Wow. So that's a good segue for, I guess, the final question, and that is, the work that you have ahead of you is humongous. You're not allowed to, it's not your task necessarily to finish the work, but neither, because it's so big and you're not going to finish it, can you desist from moving it forward. As we're hopefully coming out of COVID, and you're looking to the future of Hazon and the merger, the finalization of the merger with Pearlstone, what is it that gives you hope? What's your hope for the future?
Thank you, Steve. It's I don't need to remind myself of this, because I do get to work in a very inspiring space, but I think this is an important question for us all to ask at least once a week, at least on Shabbat, if no other time. And I do want to say that the strength of these organizations, the impact, the spaces, how sacred and inspiring it is to be in the spaces, it's really powerful, and has been a huge part of my life. My wife and I met at Isabella Freedman. She was doing Adama, I was doing Teva. There's so many of us that have been so inspired and so much hope given to us through these experiences. And I really want to thank my predecessor and founder of Hazon, Nigel Savage, for leading this movement and blazing this trail to give so much hope to so many. But I would say maybe one or two or three things that give me particular hope. One is when I'm in these immersive experiences and these retreats, particularly holiday celebrations or family camp, and there is every denomination. Like at the Shavuot retreat here at Pearlstone, there was a big Mechitza minyan, Orthodox minyan. There was a big Igal minyan with all different sort of creative liturgy. And then there was a big, I'm going to do Tai Chi or go for a walk in the forest or do my prayer experience in a different way. Minyan, not exactly minyan, but right, section. And to see that diversity and everybody coming together and learning together and celebrating together really is beautiful and gives me a lot of hope. Another piece I would name is we have this new youth group at Hazon called the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. These are high schoolers and college students, even some middle schoolers, who are stepping up and raising their voices as Jewish leaders, as climate activists, as educators, as public speakers. They are so moving to be around. They're just thoughtful and passionate and committed and hopeful. And I would say, this is a conversation, Steve. The fact that there are people like you and your congregation and leaders all around the country that want to have this conversation, that want to think about this, that want to step into it. Many of you, and I include you in this, Steve, right, been at it for years, right? Been thinking about this and doing everything we can. And there's a rising tide even more than ever before. And I think the Jewish communities are prepared to step up in an unprecedented way. And that gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you, Jakir, for being with us today for the conversation over coffee. I look forward to continuing not only this conversation, but finding opportunities to partner together and to continue to bring this vision of Hazon to the world and to the Jewish world in particular. As you know, as I shared with you, Hazon is one of my has a soft spot in my heart since I started doing the Israel ride with Hazon and the Machon Arva in 2008. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you in this role as you take the reins from Nigel, who is I'm a chassid of Nigel, right? Anybody who's met Nigel, spent time with Nigel, is a chassid of Nigel. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Next week, my guest on Conversations Over Coffee is Dr. Sharon Graham, who is a scholar of Jewish community, lives in Winnipeg, the city that I grew up in. It'll be an interesting conversation about the Jewish community of Winnipeg and the way in which it has evolved, grown, declined, grown again over the last several years. So we hope you'll join us next week, same time, for Conversations Over Coffee. To find out more about Jakir and Hazon, www.hazon.org. That's the website until they finish their merger, and I'm sure have a new brand identity that'll be coming out as a result of that. But for now, that's where you can find out more. Thanks for joining us. Shavua Tov. Have a good week.
Thanks, Steve. Shavua Tov, everybody.